You said a lot of wild shit.
Maybe. Maybe
He said a lot of wild shit, and then CNN. Right.
And all of a sudden, I'm standing in the White House. And it was very, very surreal. That room was so beautiful to me, much more beautiful than it actually is. You know, to me, when I looked at the bed, and the bed you could see it was a little bit longer, had to be a little bit longer. He lost his son, and they suffered, the two of them suffered from melancholia. They didn't call it depression. They called it melancholia, and they suffered from it. He was a very depressed guy, and she was a very depressed woman, more so than him. And on top of that, they lost their son, whose name was Ted. And it was just seeing it in the little pictures, a little tiny picture. I mean, you can't see the details there. Little tiny, everything the way it was. A little tiny picture of Tad, who he lost. And it was devastating. And he was, he was... look, he was in a war. He was having a hard time because he couldn't beat Robert E. Lee. Robert E. Lee won like 13 battles in a row, and he was getting like a phobia, like a fighter. You know, a lot about the fight stuff, but like, I went to a UFC fight, and it was a champion who was 14-1 about a year ago. You would know the names. 14-1, and the only guy he lost to was this one guy, but the guy that he was fighting was like almost just an average fighter, lost numerous times, but he beat this one guy. So I said, okay.
I really don't know who you're talking about. I'm trying to...
I will figure it out.
Okay.
But about a year ago. But the point is that he lost. He wasn't nearly the fighter as the one. But the one who was not nearly the fighter had beaten. He's the only guy that beat the champ like 5 years before. And I said, I'll take the guy that won the other fight. And that's what happened. He beat him a second time.
Sometimes
Yeah,
psychological advantages.
what is this crazy thing? Lincoln had I don't know, I've never read this. I heard it from people in the White House who really understand what was going on with the whole life of the White House. But Lincoln had the yips about, in a way, as the golfers would say. He had a phobia about Robert E. Lee. He said, I can't beat Robert, because Robert E. Lee won many battles in a row. He was just beating the hell out of him. You know, they tried to get Robert E. Lee to be on the North, but he said, no, I have to be with my state. You know, the state was his whole thing, and he went to the South. And he was, I've had generals tell me, we have some great generals, the real generals, not the ones you see on television, the ones that beat ISIS with me. We defeated ISIS in record time. It was supposed to take years, and we did it in a matter of weeks. These are great generals. These are tough guys. These are not woke guys. But their favorite general in terms of genius was Robert E. Lee.
In terms of strategy, you mean?
Strategically. He took a war that should have been over in a few days, and it was, years of hell, of vicious war. And so here I am standing there, and again, I had never really done this before. I ran a number of months before I won. I probably, I guess if you max it out, it would be a year, something like that. So I had never run for office. And I did well. I mean, I went into debates. We had 18 people, including me, and then slowly but surely they started to disappear. We had debates, good debates.
Everyone's aware of all this stuff, but what I want to get to is, what was the experience once you got inside?
It was just
what did you think it was going to be like in terms of your ability to govern?
Yeah.
This is your first experience governing anything. You've never been a governor. You've never been a mayor.
Private stuff.
Business.
Yeah.
But now all of a sudden you're inside the White House.
The biggest thing was just that first moment of being in this hallowed. It was really a hallowed place to me. It was
surreal.
It was beyond. To me, that was the experience. It was a surreal experience. And then, with time, that wears off. With time, it becomes, your place where you stay. And I was doing a lot of. I had two things that I really focused on: governing the country and survival. Because from the moment I won, before I got to office, all of a sudden, they came down. I mean, nobody has ever been treated that way. And you see that. I mean, you see where in the Washington Post very early on they said, well, now the impeachment stuff starts. And it did. I mean, it literally started from the beginning. So I had survival and run the nation. I had a combination. Most people don't have the survival. They get in. I think
What did you expect though in terms of like once you got inside, you had to appoint all these people?
Yeah.
Like how many appointments did you have to make?
well,
within
you
a
have
very
actually
short
you have
amount of
actually
time?
10,000 appointments. Now they're different. You have big ones, and then they appoint
Right.
100 people and 200 people. But the president really is involved with approximately 10,000 appointments. So you'll appoint a secretary of state, and he or she
Right.
will appoint a lot of people. So it's a lot. But in terms of major ones, you probably have like 100, but they're big ones. Treasury, state, military.
And how did
appointments.
you know who to appoint?
Well, I didn't. I had no
You didn't.
experience. You have
Right.
to understand, Joe.
So
I
are
was
you
there
going-
17 times in Washington, and I never stayed over. According to the press, which I think is probably right, over the years, I was only there 17 times. I never stayed over. So now I'm sitting there, I'm saying, this place is gorgeous, but, I don't know anybody. It's like you go to certain areas, and other areas, they may be great. Washington was great. Washington's not so great right now. We got to fix it. We got to make it better. A very dangerous place, very badly maintained place. We're going to make it great. We're going to make it better. We're going to bring it back. But I wasn't a Washington guy. I was a New York guy. I was a New York builder, and I built buildings in New York, and I knew that whole world, but I didn't know the Washington world too well. And all of a sudden, you're supposed to be appointing top people. So
What did you think it was going to be like? Versus like, did you have any ideas of what it was going to be like and what was different?
Well, I was always involved in politics, but usually from the standpoint of a donor. I
Right.
was a donor. I was a big donor. I gave money to politicians. I enjoyed politics.
Mostly Democrats, right?
Both, really, pretty much both. I actually pictures of Ronald Reagan and me when I was very
But
young.
you were a Democrat until like what year?
I was a Democrat. I could get you the exact, but the early 90s, I switched over eventually. Actually, they had a reform party. I was thinking about doing that for a little while, but then fortunately I didn't because it's very hard. It's a two-party system. And anytime you hear third party, I know you like RFK Jr. and so do I. He's a fantastic guy.
I do, but I thought
that
that
whole
being
thing
an
is very
independent
tough.
was nonsense.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work because even if you do great, you're not going to get Congress. In other words,
Right.
you need now to say, okay, now I'll get half of Congress. They're never going to vote for you. So even if you got there, which is very hard, and I know how you feel about Bobby, and I feel the same way, and he's now with us. But it doesn't. It's pure and simple. It's a two-party system.
Right.
And somebody, I won't mention his name, but somebody spent $250 million trying to get the nomination as a Reform Party candidate or whatever, and they got just nowhere. You get eaten. You just get eaten. The system eats you alive.
Right.
So, so it was really somebody that not only was new to Washington, but was new to politics. So, in the office of the presidency, over the years, all those presidents, you've had 92% were politicians and 8% were generals. General Eisenhower, General Washington, right? General George Washington. You had generals. So it's 8% no admirals, 8% generals, and 92% politicians. They're politicians and they go on. So they never had a business guy, or they never had a guy that wasn't elected to an office. They were all like Ronald Reagan he was a movie actor, but he became the governor of California for, I think, 2 terms, and then he ran. So you'd never had a thing like this. But in terms of me, and sometimes I'd use it as an excuse, and I don't like having excuses actually, but I'd use it as an excuse. I had to rely on people that I respected or liked, but that I didn't know that well because I didn't know them that well. Some of those people I campaigned against because, when you have 18 people, we had mostly politicians running in the election, running in the primaries. And they got knocked out one by one, but I got to like some of them. Some of them I didn't like at all. I don't like them now. And I'd rely on them and I'd rely on other people. So all of a sudden, people would come in, I'd like to recommend so-and-so to be Secretary of State. And I'd have 3, 4 people recommend. One thing I can tell you, everybody wants the position.
Of course.
No, but sometimes I'll hear a lot of people don't want to work with Trump because Trump is tough to work with, et cetera. Let me tell you, everybody wants to be any one of these positions. They die for it.
Of course.
Now, they don't want to be known. I mean, there's a particular guy in New York, primarily, very big, very successful, very strong, very political, although he's not a politician. He'd give anything to be Secretary of State, but if they ask him, no, I don't think I would do it. But in the meantime, begging for it, okay, begging. They all,
I believe you.
Everybody wants it.
But what
No
I
matter,
wanted to
and
get
by the
to,
way, no matter what you do, but it's very dangerous to pick somebody outside of a politician because a politician's been basically vetted for years.
right.
You pick a business guy, and they've never been vetted at all, and they're the head of a big company or something, but they've never been vetted. You know nothing about his personal life. You know nothing about
Right.
where he's been. When you put him in, it's a little bit dangerous because
Right.
all of a sudden they get checked up, and you hear things that you're saying, "Wow, this is not going to work out too well." So it's very dangerous. Picking people that are outside of politics is somewhat dangerous.
So
I
you're
think.
kind of stuck in a position where you have to pick established people. And then the problem with established people is established people are already indoctrinated into the system.
And they're stiffs in many cases.
Stiffs.
They're survivors. I find that,
What do you mean by stiffs? When you say
a
stiffs?
stiff, they don't have nothing. They have nothing. Or they're smart and survive. One little thing. So there was a congressman years before I ran, and I was very close to him. And I needed a license on something, and he was very important in getting the license. But it was a little bit controversial, the license, this particular thing that was being licensed. But I was close to this guy and helped him and everything else. And I went to him. I said, I'd like to have your help. And he said, let me take a look at it. I said, ooh, that's not too good. But I really hope you're going to help. And anyway, he tapped me along for a long period of time and ultimately didn't do it. And I said, you are a stiff. You could have done this thing so easy, etc. But it was controversial. He was in Congress for many years, like 28 years. And, there's a reason when somebody's there for 28 years, you got to be sort of smart.
Right.
You have
A
all the
survivor.
scandals. And I realized he was a survivor. What
And
he
so they
did-
never do anything controversial.
do-
never take any chances
yeah,
or
they
speak
don't
their
take-
opinion that's outside of the. Yeah.
sometimes. And yet I don't disrespect him for it.
So-
I actually respected the guy more in a certain way. I said,
Because he
know,
did survive.
You know what? He's been there for 28 years, and he made it through. A lot of people don't make it through.
It's a
They
good
don't
way for
last long.
non-exceptional people to survive.
Well, it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it certainly is.
So you're in there. You have 10,000 appointments you have to make. So you're getting advice from people. And at one point in time, did you have a moment in time where you realized these are bad choices? Like some of these people I shouldn't have had in there.
Oh, yeah. I think so. The one question that you'll ask me, that I think you'll ask me, that people seem to ask, and I always come up with the same answer. If the one mistake, because I had a lot of success, great economy, great everything. Everything was great. The military, we rebuilt it, biggest tax cuts in history, all this stuff. We had a great presidency. 3 Supreme Court justices. Most people get none. You pick them young. This way they're there for 50 years, right? So,
Right.
Even if a president is there for 8 years, oftentimes they never have a chance. I had 3. It was sort of the luck of the draw. But I will say that it always comes back to the same answer. The biggest mistake I made was I picked some people. I picked some great people, but you don't think about that. I picked some people that I shouldn't have picked. I picked a few people that I shouldn't have picked. And
Neocons?
yeah, neocons or bad people or disloyal people or
People that were just
people
bad.
that were into the
You
people
got bad
that
advice.
Yeah, I mean, look, you're reading about them a little bit today. A guy like Kelly, who was a bully, but a weak person. You know more about bullies than anybody probably around because you deal in a certain sport where the bullies are exposed very quickly.
Yeah.
But he's bad. Bolton was an idiot, but he was great for me because I'd go in with a guy like a John Bolton. John Bolton. A friend of mine called me up. I was picking Bolton, and he's a very smart guy. His name is Phil Ruffin. He's a very rich guy from Las Vegas. He's a great card player. He doesn't play cards, but he's a great player. He's just a natural. Got poker sense, right? The good old poker sense. And Phil Ruffin is a very, very wise kind of a guy, and one of the richest people around, and has had great success and understands people. So it was in that I was picking Bolton, or I picked Bolton. He called up. He said, "Don't pick him. Why? He's a bad guy." Now he wasn't in politics at all. He's in various businesses. He said, "He's a bad guy. It always works out bad with that guy." I said, "Oh man, I wish you told me this 2 weeks ago. I already hired him. He's here." And and he was right. But he was good in a certain way. He's a nut job. And every time I had to deal with a country, when they saw this whack job standing behind me, they said, "Oh, man, Trump's going to go to war with us." He was with Bush when they went stupidly into the Middle East. They should have never done it. I used to say it as a civilian. So I always got more publicity than other people. And it wasn't like I was trying. In fact, I don't know exactly why. Maybe you can tell me why.
Oh, I could definitely tell you. You said a lot of wild shit.
Maybe. Maybe
He said a lot of wild shit, and then CNN, in all their brilliance, by highlighting your wild shit, made you much more popular.
Yeah.
And they boosted you in the polls because people were tired of someone talking in this bullshit, pre-prepared politician lingo. And even if they didn't agree with you, they at least knew whoever that guy is, that's him. That's really him. Yeah. When you see certain people talk, certain people in the public eye, you don't know who they are. You have no idea who they are. It's very difficult to know. You see them in conversations. They have these pre-planned answers. They say everything. It's very rehearsed. You never get to the meat of it. One of the beautiful things about you is that you freeball. Like, you get out and you do these huge events, and you're just talking, and you're making. We've highlighted you on the show many times when you did this Biden impression where he's walking around, he doesn't know what he's doing. It's funny. It's stand up. It's funny stuff, but it's like. And you were making fun of Elon one time. You were doing an Elon impression. It's great. You have like comedic instincts. Like when you said to Hillary, "You'd be in jail." Like it's great timing.
Yeah.
But it's like that kind of stuff was unheard of as a politician. Like no one had done that. And I think
it's funny. You need at least the attitude of a comedian when you're doing this business. This is a very dangerous business. First of all, it's a very tough business.
It's the most dangerous business.
It's the most, well, for a job?
Yes. I mean, other than going to war and being a firefighter or being a cop, it's the most dangerous business.
It's the most dangerous. Being president is the most dangerous.
Especially you. I mean, you haven't even got to the election. There's been 2 assassination attempts, and they've brushed those out of the news like it was nothing.
Yeah, they'd rather not talk about them.
Imagine if there was assassination attempts on Biden, how hard people would be attacking the right, how they would be trying to get guns taken away from people. They would try to ramp up gun laws. They would try to figure out some way to blame you. If there was attacks if Biden got shot in the ear, we would have never heard the end of it.
But I think he's in good shape because it's only consequential presidents. If you take a look at what's happened, look, I'm for having countries pay us billions and billions and trillions even dollars. I took in hundreds of billions of dollars from China. Nobody took in 10 cents, not one other president. I do things that make it, that don't necessarily make me so popular. I just do what's right. And when you do that, you're more, look at Iran. We would have never had the attack on Israel at all. Iran was broke. I told China, if you buy, you can't do business in the United States under any circumstances. We're going to go cold turkey with China. Some people think that would have been a good idea anyway. But if you buy any oil, 1 barrel of oil from them, you're not doing business. And I said that to many countries. Iran was broke. They had no money for Hezbollah. They had no money for Hamas. They had no money. But I make myself, I understand what I'm doing. You make yourself a target. And it's a very dangerous business. But if you just look at statistically, so I saw a thing, I don't know if it's right, but 0.1% for a race car driver. Yeah, it's a pretty dangerous business, right?
Yeah.
0.1% for a bull rider. I tell you, to me,
you're talking death.
These guys that ride the bulls is worse than UFC. It's worse.
Yeah.
These guys, you see these big monster bulls, and you see it in slow motion where the foot is like, an inch away from the head. If it hits him, the guy's gone. But they die. They die.
So 0.1% die. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, 0.1% die.
Right.
And they certainly get hurt badly. Really, they can't walk after a certain period of time. But with a president, if you look at
the amount of assassination attempts.
And attempts, too.
Yeah.
And attempts. No, it's a very dangerous position. I never thought of that, by the way, when I did it. You don't tend to think.
Did you just assume because people loved you on The Apprentice, they were going to love you as a president?
I figured it would be so easy. It's very
it probably
interesting.
would have been if the media didn't attack you the way they did. If they didn't conflate you with Hitler. I mean, even today, like Kamala was talking about you and Hitler. They're going to take what you said about Robert E. Lee. Oh, Donald Trump wishes the South won.
That's right. He loves Robert E. Lee.
They love to take things out of context and distort things.
Well,
But
they don't even have to take them out. They make them up entirely. Okay,
They do
make
that
'em.
too.
But it's interesting when you mentioned the I was very popular, and all those people loved me. I mean, some of these women, they're so stupid, and Joy, she would every time she'd see me, I'd be in the theater or something, and she'd, you have to be on the show again. Come on, let's go. We have.
she
to
loved you.
To love me.
That episode where,
By the way, Whoopi,
people should watch that episode just to see what we're talking about. Like I said, we don't want to get a copyright strike, so we're not going to put it up. But
okay.
if you watch the episode, it's bananas. It's like an alternative universe, and it's only
but Whoopi
9 years
me.
ago.
Whoopi loved me.
you, gives you a hug and a kiss.
And how about that other one, the new one on there, the one from my administration? She writes me a letter. You're the greatest president. She leaves. She worked as an assistant press secretary. I hardly knew her. But she leaves and she writes me this gorgeous letter. What's her name? She was, I don't even know. Anyway, she was in the administration. She's on now currently. Sits on the far right-hand side, whatever the hell her name is. And she writes a letter, the most beautiful letter. She's quoted in the paper. He was the greatest president, blah, blah, blah. Then all of a sudden she goes to the View. She started hitting the hell out of me. Because they won't hire her unless. I've had many people go on CNN and they call and said, I don't know what to do. They want to pay me a lot, but I have to be negative on you. I said, be negative. That's okay. There are guys on like CNN, they won't hire them. Sean Duffy is a congressman, and he retired. He got a good job with CNN, but he was only positive about Trump. So they kept him, but they would never put him on. I mean, I respect what he did. He could have gone, negative. I tell people, go negative. Let my friends make the money.
Well,
it's just so crooked. The press is so crooked.
It's crooked, but it's also they're diminishing themselves. They're killing all their credibility, and it's opening up the credibility to new media. It's opening up the credibility to independent media. All these.
The worst I've ever seen, though, and I've seen the worst. I mean, I've been a part of it. I've seen the worst. Kamala goes on 60 Minutes, gave an answer that a child wouldn't give. It was so bad. And 60 Minutes took the answer out. They took the whole, and they put another answer in.
They edited it deceptively.
Which didn't make sense either, but it was better. They took it wasn't editing. It was fraud. This was not editing.
Right.
Editing is where I'll give an answer and they'll take a couple of words and change them around, or they might even take a sentence or two off, which is very bad. But it's sort of bad. I'd give an answer which was a very good answer. I always talk about, I like to give the weave. I like to.
You like to weave things in.
Yeah, but when you do the weaves, and you have to be very smart to do weaves. When you do the weave, look at this. Just in this one thing, we're talking about little pieces all over here, but it always ends up.
Home.
No, it comes back home.
Yeah.
For the right people. For the wrong people, it doesn't come back home, and they end up in the wilderness, right? but they can take my answer, and you know what? They may take a little piece of it out or something, and they use the term, "Yes, we wanted to save time." Well, it's not. But I've never heard. I think it's the biggest scandal in broadcast history, what happened to CBS. So you have CBS 60 Minutes. That's a news program. It's not an entertainment program. It's under their news. It's the head of their news thing. She gives an answer that shows that she's essentially incompetent. And they took the answer. Could you imagine them doing that for me?
We can show it if you want people to see it. Can
Go
we show
ahead.
it? No?
Sure.
We get in trouble, we'll get copyright strike? Okay.
Listen,
anyone
I'll
can find
indemnify
it.
you.
But it's drastic. But what was interesting was the other full version was available initially. It was like a preview.
Somebody made a big mistake.
Somebody put that preview out
there. Some kid put the preview out.
Exactly.
And then the bosses did this or that. And then all of a sudden they said, we got a problem.
Exactly. And then
they got caught by mistake.
Well,
but don't you think that's a big, to me, and don't forget, this is election interference and fraud. And it's 60 Minutes. It's their news division. So it's
a big deal.
They give those licenses out, Joe, for free. They should pay a fortune. They're worth a fortune. They give them out for free because they're using the public airwaves. With cable, you don't have that. Cable's different. But, it's just a different deal. But with the networks, they give those licenses. They're worth billions of dollars. They give them out free, but you have to be honest and all. That was bad. I think that David Muir and that woman that was aside, I never even heard of her, but they kept interrupting me. It was like, I said, how many people am I debating here? I got this one and I got you two. But he went after me 11 different times. It's interesting. I always thought he was a nice guy, but he's just like the rest of them,
Well, that's his job, unfortunately, and I'm
No,
sure
but not when they're
what they
wrong.
want. You're right. Well, the problem was they fact-checked you, and they didn't fact-check her. And
Not
one of the
at
most
all.
egregious examples of that was when she said that there are no troops right now deployed in
Yeah.
war zones.
Yeah.
There's a very famous viral video that went online of troops in a war zone saying, "Well, what the fuck are we then?" Because there's thousands of them. Dan Crenshaw, the congressman, posted on his Instagram all of the various examples of
Too many.
troops that are deployed, thousands and thousands of troops that are currently deployed.
Stupidly deployed.
But the point is, if this is going to be an actual real debate and not a propaganda exercise, if it's going to be a real debate, you have to fact check everybody.
So
Like if
they-
someone
they
says
never went
maybe she
after her.
thought there was no,
Right.
which is also a problem. So it's one of two things. It's either it was not true, it was a lie on purpose, which is terrible, or it was the opposite. It was ignorance, which is also terrible.
Well, Joe, when I said crime is soaring, he said, no, crime has gone down. I said, where did you hear that one? Crime has gone down. I mean, I'm debating with this guy, but I've had that.
Well, there was amended FBI statistics that came out after that
Yeah.
showed that crime had gone up substantially.
And by the way, the statistics were a fraud because when they put out the statistics, they didn't include some of the worst places. They didn't include some of the worst cities, some of the most deadly places. But
And
when the
there
real
was also a
numbers came
problem-
out, I turned out to be right. But I haven't gotten...
You turn out to be right, but then there's another problem. Unreported crime is way up because people have lost. Look, the morale that the police department has in a lot of these cities where they've done this defund the police bullshit.
Right,
The morale of these
It
poor
is.
cops, it's fucking horrible.
Yeah.
It's the dumbest idea
So
of all
bad,
time.
so
But
bad.
what they've done is they've made these cops feel terrible. They're like good cops. I think cops are just like everybody else. Most of them are great. It's like everybody else. But if you run into one carpenter and he does a shitty job in your house,
right.
you say carpenters fucking suck. But they don't suck. Most of them are great. And
Police
that's the
have
key
been-
thing with cops. But the point is
Yeah.
like they did all of these things in this very foolish way.
Right.
And these cops are suffering the consequences of it. And so subsequently what happens is a lot of crime is unreported. A lot of crime, like you call the cops, they're too busy, they can't even get to you. Oh, your house got broken into? Sorry. You know, it doesn't even make a report. There's a lot of people that they just give up.
It's so sad what's happened. And I'll tell you what, I go to police funerals, and we went to one in Long Island. I visited the family in Long Island, a very big deal. It's so dangerous. People don't realize the car, dark windows, pull over. He's a gentleman. Please pull over. Door opens, guy comes out firing. Even if they were allowed to pull out their gun, which they're not, they can't, pull
Do
out
it in
the gun.
time. Yeah.
They still wouldn't have time.
It's every cop's worst nightmare.
They opened a door, and he was killed, and his partner was hurt. He was killed, and you don't even have an eighth of a second to think, and it is such a dangerous job. That in particular, think of it. You go up to a car, you don't know who's sitting there with a gun, and if they have a gun, you really don't have a chance. You're not allowed to have your gun out, by the way. They have very strict rules. So, number one, but even if you could have your gun out, the door opens and bullets start firing out, and especially where they have the dark windows, where they have the darkened windows. It is such a dangerous profession, and it's very hard to get cops now because they're not given any backup. And you're right. They have like an eighth of a second to make a decision that's going to change their life. If they make the wrong decision, they're going to end up on the front page of every newspaper in the country, and they're going to lose their house and their pension and their job, and their wife is going to be gone, and everything's
Absolutely.
going to be gone.
And here's another thing that people don't talk about. How many of them have PTSD? Probably most of them.
Yeah, it's
These
a
guys are
tough
seeing
job.
people shot all the time.
Yep.
I've talked to a ton of cops about it, and a lot of cops commit suicide. A lot of cops are deeply depressed.
But we have to give them back their
Yes.
dignity. We just have to give them back. You said it so good. You never hear anybody say that. You're never going to have it perfect. You're going to have a bad apple.
In everything, in every
Right.
profession.
But every time there's a bad apple, that gets massive publicity, and it taints everybody else.
But it's also this very irresponsible thing where people say defund the police, get rid of the police. Even Kamala Harris was a part of that. That it's a very stupid way to look at it. What you should do is fund the police. You should have better training. You should have cops that feel more appreciated. You should have something that helps mitigate this PTSD that all of them suffer through.
Right. She was a big part of defund the police. That was a big thing for her. Defund the police. Always defund the police.
Well, it's a political idea,
But
right?
anybody with that political thought
Yeah.
I don't think should be running for president. And I think people are getting wise to it. You know, we're doing pretty well. Now, I don't know, maybe in a week from now, I'll say, sorry about that, I was wrong, but we're leading everything. And I think we're going to have a very good election. But I tell people, because people are starting to get to know her. But she was defund the police. She was all these transgender operations. You know, if you wanted a sex change and you were in detention and you demanded a sex change, they would give you a sex change.
Well, the wildest one is this idea of giving free sex change to illegal immigrants.
That's right. In detention.
That is the wildest
But
thing.
she
Like,
was-
is that the biggest problem you have?
Yeah.
You just walked here from Guatemala. You need to become
That's
a girl.
right. But she was in favor of it.
Yes.
So think of it. She changed. She changed 15 policies. In fact, I'm going to send her a MAGA cap.
She
because
stole your idea about no tax for tips.
I came up with this idea that honestly nobody ever heard of. Now, it took her 2 months, but you know what? All of a sudden,
It caught fire.
and she just put it into a little speech.
Yeah,
well,
it became
but
popular.
I think we still have that issue. I think that issue is a good one for us. But now we have a lot of good issues. You know, we had the other day. Think of how simple some of these things are. We're trying to get cars built in the United States. Detroit has been really tough. It's been a disaster. They have a huge factory, a huge car auto plant being built by China in Mexico, make cars, sell them in the United States, put everybody out of business. Right, here we go again. I said, if that plant is there when I'm president, I will put 100 or 200% tariffs on every car. They'll be unsaleable in the United States. And they just announced they're not going to build the plant because they think I'm going to win. Think of it. They're not going to build the plant. This was the biggest plant in the world. It would have more than all of Michigan makes. That's how big. You know, this is what we're getting to. And I said, if that plan goes up, I want them to understand if I win, I'm going to tax those cars at the rate of 100 or 200% apiece so that you won't be able to sell them in the United States. They just announced they're not going to build the plant.
Yeah, I read this.
I did a big favor for our country by doing that. And I'm not even there yet. To me, the most beautiful word, and I've said this for the last couple of weeks, in the dictionary today, is the word tariff. It's more beautiful than love. It's more beautiful than anything. It's the most beautiful word. This country can become rich with the proper use of tariffs. It'll
Did
keep
you just
companies.
float out the idea of getting rid of income taxes and replacing it with tariffs?
Well, okay.
Were you serious about that?
Yeah, sure, but why not? Because ready? Our country was the richest relatively in the 1880s and 1890s. A president who was assassinated named McKinley. He was the tariff king. He spoke beautifully of tariffs. His language was really beautiful. We will not allow the enemy to come in and take our jobs and take our factories and take our workers and take our families unless